All right, let's get going with our first lecture topic. That one is, there we go, skeletal muscles and physical performance. Skeletal muscles and physical performance. It's actually the type of thing that you would expect that you'd find in a class like this. So let's move along. Now, here's a word for you, the neuromusculoskeletal system. Neuromusculoskeletal. It's three systems in one. So we have the nervous system, the muscular system, it's actually the skeletal muscle system, but anyway, that, and the skeletal system. They all work together. They don't really work independent of each other, so you have to have them all working together. So hence the name neuromusculoskeletal system. So anatomic systems typically do not operate in isolation. The neuromusculoskeletal system is a combination of three large anatomical systems. The nervous system, as we said, the muscular system, and of course the skeletal system. The neuromusculoskeletal system is all right. I really want to edit that one. Let's see. Let's pause. Hit that. All right, the nervous system. It controls the actions of the muscular system. The muscular system either involves contractions or relaxation. We'll really hit on that point a lot in class. So the nervous system is kind of controlling things. The muscular system is doing some contractions or it's relaxing. And if the skeletal muscles contract, well, they pull on bony levers in the skeletal system. So of course they have to be connected, so you have to have that type of scenario. But if they're pulling on it, they're going to impart some type of force. The force may result in movement or no movement. So we have scenarios where there is no movement, but anyway, we generally think in terms of joint actions that are taking place. So at this point, we're going to focus on the muscular system, but in reality, it really is all these systems together. As you learned in anatomy and physiology, three types of muscles exist. We have smooth muscle. Example of that would be in the vascular system, in which we constrict or dilate blood vessels. So blood vessels get smaller in terms of their internal diameter, or they get larger. If they're larger, it allows for a blood flow to go in a particular area. If it's constricted, depending on how much it's constricted, but let's say it's maximally constricted, then it shuts off blood flow to a particular area. Cardiac muscle, the heart, right? So the myocardium or heart contractile tissue. Obviously, that's going to be really important to us in terms of parts of the muscular system, but it's not really what we're going to be dealing with, at least in this lecture. In the subsequent lecture, we'll deal with the cardiac muscle and heart actions, but not at this time. This is what we're going to be dealing with, skeletal muscle. It's associated with force production at joints, and it is the topic that we're dealing with now. Within skeletal muscles, so if you have a gross muscle, that's a whole muscle, all right? Two main entities exist. We have what's called a structural unit and a functional unit. The structural unit for the whole muscle or the gross muscle is called a muscle fiber. The muscle fiber is a muscle cell. It's one and the same thing. They are one and the same thing. Muscle fiber, muscle cell, the terms may be used interchangeably. All right, the functional unit is called the motor unit. So this is the smallest aspect of the muscle that we can use at any one particular time. I haven't described what a motor unit is yet, but just think in terms of if we need something out of the muscle, the smallest thing that we can get is a motor unit. Not a muscle fiber, not the whole muscle, but motor units. That's what we call it recruitment. So that's what we recruit if our muscles are going to generate force. Getting back to the structural unit again, the muscle fiber, the muscle cell. Gross muscles, and again, what do we talk about? It's a whole muscle. They differ in size based on the size and number of skeletal muscle fibers. So each individual fiber, they may be, let's just say, thicker, or they may be thinner. And then in muscles, some muscles have like a ton, really over 1 million fibers or cells, and in other ones they have only a few cells. Obviously these are going to be smaller muscles because no individual fiber is going to be that large to compensate for a very small number of fibers. The size of individual fibers is largely dependent upon two additional primary constituents. So what determines the size of the fiber? What makes it up? We have something called sarcoplasm. This is the muscle cytoplasm or the muscle protoplasm. In muscle tissue, it has a special name. We call it sarcoplasm. And then a second thing will be the contractile elements that are within each individual fiber. And these, there are actually two different things, but one is like a subsection of the other, or a subpart of the other. We have the elements in general, or contractile elements, are called myofibrils. Myofibrils. In reality, a myofibril is made up of a series, or you might refer to it as a chain, of sarcomeres. So when you hear sarcomere, it's just one little segment of a myofibril. In both cases, they are contractile entities within the muscle fiber. All right, so we talk about myofibrils, and those myofibrils are actually made up of a series of repeating sarcomeres. So what that means is you have a sarcomere, then you have another one next to it, and another one next to that, and they all basically look about the same. So we're looking at a diagram of skeletal muscle, and you can see a bone. Now I could do my little cursor and get to different things, but you're not going to see that. So you're going to have to kind of look at that. You have to kind of pay attention. I'm sure everyone can recognize the bone tissue. It's a long bone. Basically, it looks like it's a femur, an upper leg bone. But anyway, so we've got this long bone, and you can see that there's something attached to it. Well, the muscle is going to be attached to it. If the muscle's not attached to a bone, it's not going to be doing anything with that bone. So it's got to be attached, and it's attached by way of a tendon. I think everybody knows that, but regardless, the tendon is a connective tissue, or one aspect of connective tissue that connects the muscle to the bone, right? If the tendon's disrupted, if the tendon's torn or ruptured, it's not going to do the job. In other words, if the muscle contracts, it's not going to be able to do anything unless it's got a viable tendon. All right, so if you see the word tendon down below that, you see what's called the gross muscle. Again, it's just the whole muscle. And this is just a little segment of it. You're seeing a cross-sectional end of it. But anyway, you see that, and then I'm going to skip that thing below it. Well, I say I'm going to skip it, then I'm going to mention it, but the fascicle or a muscle bundle, we really won't get into that in this particular class, but let's just say it's a sub-portion of the gross muscle. And then we can get down further as part of that bundle. And what's it a bundle of? It's a bundle of muscle fibers, which is what we'll be addressing more so in this class. So we'll talk about the muscle, and we'll talk about the fibers within the muscle. And again, the fibers are muscle cells. And then we said that, well, within these muscle fibers, we had sarcoplasm, which is muscle cytoplasm. And we said that we had contractile elements, and we gave them a name of myofibrils. And sometimes you may see the word sarcomere, which is only one little segment of a myofibril. And so, again, I forgot I had these things circled like that, but anyway, with the animation, they kind of stream in there. Gross muscle, muscle fibers, myofibrils. Sarcoplasm is not labeled here, but it lies around and between the myofibrils. So we said with the muscle fiber, we've got these contractile elements, and we've got the sarcoplasm. Well, the sarcoplasm fills in the gaps around the myofibrils. All right, the structure of a single muscle fiber. So here we're looking at it blown up a little bit more. Again, you can see like a cross-sectional end of it, a little segment of the lengthwise of the muscle cell, but it's not all of it. It's really basically cut off at both ends. All right, and so you can see there's, and again, I wish I could get the cursor to work so that you could see what I'm doing, but anyway, if you look at it, it looks like there's an outer covering, like a sleeve that goes around something. All right, or a skin, so to speak. And then you've got these other things inside of it. It's almost like you've got a package of hot dogs. How about that? And these hot dogs, when you slice them open, you can see that they've got little dots in one end and then a little bit larger dots on that same end. All right, let's see what we've got here. So the sarcoplasm is what lies in between. The myofibril, you can see one of those teased out, and all those similar looking structures are all myofibrils, so it's not just one. We'll count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and if you look back towards the label that says Z-line, you know, it's not where those other ones are. You can see another one back there. But anyway, there's nothing, this is just illustrative. The fact that it's showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 myofibrils doesn't suggest that the muscle fibers have 7 myofibrils. They can have many, many myofibrils, and with training or detraining, those numbers can change. All right, but anyway, myofibrils, multiple ones, and then we have the sarcoplasm in between. We do have a nucleus. Every cell's got a nucleus. In the case of muscle cells, actually they're multinucleated, but again, we won't really worry about that. All right, so that was the structural unit. We'll be coming back to it again. I'm just kind of give you a little bit of an overview, then we'll come back in, go in a little bit more depth about these different things. All right, so the functional unit. First we had the structural unit. Now we've got the functional unit. And the functional unit is called the motor unit. So what is that? Well, the motor unit consists of all muscle fibers. Again, those are muscle cells that are innervated. Well, what does that mean? It means you've got the nerve controls the action of those muscle fibers, all right? And so all the muscle fibers that are controlled by terminal branches of a single motor neuron. It's the the motor neuron or the efferent neuron. It branches out at the end. That end portion of it's called an axon, but again, we won't worry about that. So you've got a single motor neuron. It branches out, and each one of those branches of that motor neuron comes in close contact with individual muscle fibers. All those fibers that are innervated or supplied by branches of a single motor neuron or motor nerve, they make up one motor unit. Now within a muscle, we're going to have multiple motor units, and some of them there are a lot of motor units, and others there are a smaller number of them. There's no fixed number of fibers within a motor unit. It's just however many branches of the neuron control whatever number of muscle fibers, that makes up the single motor unit. And so here is a representation of that, and I think actually I can't go back, so if I go forward too far then I end up messing up. So let me just leave it right where it is, and then if it circles some things, then it's basically kind of a review of what we're saying. So it says alpha motor neuron. We're just calling that a motor neuron, right? There are different types of motor neurons. There are gamma neurons and gamma efferents and alpha efferents, but we'll just say it's a motor neuron. And you can see that there's the dendrites and the cell body at one end, and then as you're coming down towards those things that look like they're muscle fibers, which is what it's depicting, then that long thing, that tail looking deal there, is called an axon. This one happens to have, it's a myelinated one. It's got fat tissue that kind of surrounds it and rounds that axon, and it facilitates the speed of conduction of the neural impulse as it comes from the cell body. But anyway, so we got that, and then when you get down close to the muscle fibers, you can see that yellow portion, it kind of splits off. Well, it's come in contact with, well, in this one, I can see 1, 2, 3. I don't think I'm missing anything, but it looks like there are 3 fibers in this particular, it's going to be a motor unit. So in this particular motor unit, it looks like there are only 3 fibers. And so you could have 50 fibers in there. But in this case, it's showing 3. All right. So, and I'll say this more than once, but anyway, when you have these muscle fibers and they're innervated by these branches, if the scenario is such, or the situation is such that the muscle is going to contract, all right, then in reality, only a motor unit's going to contract, right? And if and that's going to generate a certain amount of force. And if we need more force, we're going to get additional motor units involved. All right, and that's called motor unit recruitment. Now, with motor unit recruitment, of course, the more motor units you bring into play, the more force that you're going to be able to generate. Now, there's another aspect of this, is that when you recruit a motor unit, you recruit the entire motor unit. You don't just recruit part of it, it's the whole deal. It's either all the way on or all the way off. Well, what does that mean? It's either that entire motor unit, all the fibers, muscle fibers in there are contracting, or they're all relaxing. So if we need, for a muscle, a gross muscle, to generate a little force, then we'll have a few motor units that are fully contracting, and others will be fully relaxed. right? So we're only going to have a little bit of a few of the motor units that are involved in that. Let's see. So that, again, there you go. Single motor unit, muscle fibers. Don't worry again about the alpha motor neuron. Just think of it as motor neuron. All right. So that's a little bit of review there. And I didn't do it formally like this, but multiple motor units are located in each gross muscle, each whole muscle. No fixed number, just we've got many of them. If motor unit is recruited, then all fibers within it are concurrently contracting. So if it's the all or none law of motor units. We've got more than one all or none law, but in this particular case, if you recruit a motor unit, it's contracting completely, and if you don't recruit it, then it's relaxed completely. So, as force demands increase, additional motor units within the same gross muscle are recruited. And so I'm showing here, okay, we've got a little cube or a little box, if you like, and whoop, there's a something. You see the end of the arrow, so we're going to be pulling on that box, and you can imagine, well, we've got one little rope or string or whatever attached to it. We're pulling on it, and so that's suggesting one motor unit. Up, now we got two of them, and so what that's suggesting is that, well, that's an additional motor unit, so you would expect that's going to be more force. And there's the third one, and I think I've got 4. I don't think I've got 5. But anyway, you get the idea. As you need more force, you recruit more motor units. There you go. All right. All right, so in this particular drawing, it's depicting 2 motor units, right? Again, in a whole muscle, a gross muscle, you're not going to have just 2 motor units. You're going to have many more. But you can imagine trying to draw in 100 motor units in this little drawing. It's probably going to, the main thing it'll do is just confuse you. But just think in terms of, you've got multiple of these, and here they're depicting 2 of them. Now I've only got 2 branches of this one motor neuron that are circled in yellow. Let me see if I've got, it doesn't look like it. Well, that's just showing 2 of them. But for that one that's got the 2 yellow circles around it, that's showing 1 fiber, 2 fibers, 3 fibers, 4, and that one, it looks like it's hitting on 2 muscle fibers, so that might be 5 muscles that are within that, or muscle fibers that are within that motor unit. So anyway, you can see off to the left side it says motor unit, and then below that it says motor unit. So that's just showing 2 of them. Again, unrealistic in terms of real life, that I can't think of any scenario where you'd have only 2 motor units in a gross muscle. You'd have many, many more. All right, so we said skeletal muscle fiber. What was it made up of? Well, it had contractile elements and it had sarcoplasm. So contractile elements were myofibrils, and then it had sarcoplasm, which is the muscle cytoplasm. All right, so what is this sarcoplasm? Well, it's made up of 75% fluid and 25% protein. Now, for a lot of people, you're thinking, protein. We're going to be generating some contractions with that. Well, not in this particular case. Sarcoplasm, the protein is not configured in such a way that it's going to generate any force or any contraction within the muscle. Sarcoplasm doesn't contract. We're going to use it for energy metabolism. We're going to have things that are taking place within it, but it's not for generating force. So if you happen to have a muscle that's got a huge amount of sarcoplasm and has lesser amounts of myofibrils, then it's going to be a larger muscle that's not going to be as strong as you might think it would be. The myofibrils are associated with force generation. Sarcoplasm, we can just think of it in terms of size. So with these myofibrils, various protein filaments configured to enable the contractile process, the force generation process. And as we've repeatedly said, and will repeatedly say more so here, and that is that it's a myofibril is made up of a series or a chain of sarcomeres. You don't know what a sarcomere is, or well, I haven't explained what a sarcomere is yet. You might know what it is, but I haven't explained that yet. So for some of you, it's kind of a mystery term, just a word. All right, so skeletal muscle, you can see the gross muscle, the muscle fibers. That was just a little review to look at that. Muscular system. We mentioned before that muscles have multiple nuclei, all of which are associated with the vegetative function of the cell. Basically keeping it alive. How about that? I hit it twice. I can't go back, so we'll just leave it at that. Each fiber has a cell wall. Remember, the fiber is a cell, so all cells have a cell wall. And it has its own special name in muscle fibers. It's called the sarcolemma. The sarcolemma. Now, this is not an exercise physiology class, but assuming you're going to take that, which many of you will, if not all of you, you will go into detail about the structure and function of 3 substructures of the sarcolemma. They are listed below, but note what it says there. But will not be covered in this course. You will not be responsible for knowing that in this particular course. Now, when you take exercise physiology, yep, you'll be going into substantially more detail than what we're going into right here. I'm just kind of scratching the surface on some stuff. All right. So what are these substructures of the sarcolemma? Again, just for your edification, just for your information. You don't have to remember it, though, for this class. They're called transverse tubules, terminal cisternae, and the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So those are aspects of the sarcolemma. What's a sarcolemma? It's the cell wall, the special name for the cell wall of muscle cells or muscle fibers. All right, now we talked about a structural unit, but this is the structural unit of a myofibril. The other structural unit we talked about was the structural unit of the gross muscle. So note the distinction there. One's the structural unit of the gross muscle fiber, all right, and one's the structural unit of the myofibril. Myofibrils were the contractile elements within each muscle fiber, all right, and we said they were made up of a series or a chain of sarcomeres. Whoa, I'm not sure. I slid my hand across a little bar there, and it highlighted everything at once. Again, we'll just kind of go with that. If the series of sarcomeres is to act as a unit, the sarcomeres need to be connected. So again, we'll give you a little bit of a figure or picture type thing, depiction of that, so you can see what we're talking about. But anyway, so we've got a myofibril made up of a chain of sarcomeres. If like you think of a chain, a little beaded type chain, each of the beads has to be connected to the other beads in order for it to function as a chain. Otherwise, it's just a whole bunch of beads, right? So the connective type tissue between the sarcomeres, it's known as a Z-disc or a Z-line. We used to always call them Z-lines, but anyway, a Z-disc or a Z-line is the connection between sarcomeres. All right. The location of the Z-disc can be seen using a light microscope. So if you use a microscope that's lit, right, a regular one, you can magnify the myofibril, and you can actually see those Z lines or Z disc. Other aspects within the sarcomere may also be identified using a light microscope. They appear under magnification as alternating dark and light bands, if you like, light and dark bands. But anyway, they're alternating bands that either don't transmit light at all, or they transmit progressively greater amounts of light. So they're lighter ones, and then you have darker bands or zones within these sarcomeres. So recall, a muscle will either be relaxed or contracting, and the length of these bands will reflect the degree of contraction. So the muscle is either going to be doing that, and what's contracting in reality, we've got sarcomeres and the myofibrils. Right? So the sarcomeres are substructures of the myofibrils, so they're going to be contracting. And if you look at the length of the sarcomere and you look at these bands, you'll be able to tell whether the muscle is contracting or not. In a relaxed sarcomere, you have the following. So relaxed, it's not contracting, it's not generating any force, right? So let's see if I can do this without screwing it up by having my thumb hit the little touchpad there. All right, so we have a very light band called the I band. Again, these are just words until you get a picture of it, but anyway, you have an I band. An A band is a dark zone, and actually you've got a very dark portion of the A band, then you've got a semi-dark portion, like in the central portion of the A band. When the sarcomere is relaxed, you have that. You have an H zone, that's that semi-dark area in the middle of the A band. The I band and H zone disappear in a fully contracted sarcomere. They disappear. So again, these are just words right now. We need to get a picture so you can something to hang your hat on. But anyway, let's just say that you always are going to have an A band, but the I band and H zone exist primarily in a relaxed sarcomere. When it's fully contracted, then they really should disappear. All right, so if we look here, I think we've seen this before, maybe, yeah, I think we did, but I've added in some additional information. So let's see, I know I've got some circles around these, or arrows. There we go, Z disc. Now there are two arrows to the Z disc, just an arrow going directly above it. It's a short little line. And then the other one cuts across and goes to another one. Well, if you look there, you'll see there's a Z disc, another Z disc, and between the two Z discs, that's called a sarcomere. Now what's a Z disc or the Z line? That's a connective tissue holding sarcomeres together or connecting them. So that means that in this depiction, even though it's not labeled, that there's a sarcomere before the one that's labeled and there's one after it. And yeah, in both cases they're cut off, so you can't see the whole sarcomere. Now let me get with our little, there we go. So sarcomere, you can see that's one sarcomere. It goes from Z disc to Z disc. All right, and then off to the left, you see I've got a whole bunch of arrows going out here. Well, what are they pointing at? What do you think? If we've got a sarcomere is a component of what? Of a myofibril, right? So we have a myofibril, and it's made up of this series of sarcomeres. And so these these arrows are pointing to 1, 2, 3, 4, fill in the blank, myofibrils. 4 myofibrils, right? All right, so we said we've got this connective tissue, this Z disc or this Z line that connects the sarcomeres within each myofibril. But, really for muscle tissue, you've got multiple levels of connective tissue. So it's basically you've got it'll very smaller structures and then with bigger structures and then bigger and bigger, put it all together, and finally the connective tissue is for the gross muscle or the whole muscle connecting it to the bone, right? So that's the ultimate final connective tissue. The lowest level that we ordinarily think of anyway would be the Z disc or the Z line. So we've mentioned that Z disc or Z line connects the sarcomeres. All right, so we're going to have something that this is not a Z disc or a Z line, but it's something that maybe you can hang a hat on. Hopefully it won't confuse you, but it's a picture of a train, a railroad train, and a coupling between the cars, and we're saying that coupling is analogous to the Z disc or the Z line. So let me hit my mark here. There we go. So you've got this train, and you can see in this case it's a coal train. So each one of those things is filled up with coal. So obviously it was an automated type system because they look like they're identical, right? They look like they're all the same, which is what you would expect for a sarcomere, that all of them are going to be the same. And so in reality, though, those are individual cars that are linked together. And so what links them together in this case? The little connector. Now for a Z disc, it's not just a isolated little area. It basically goes all the way across the end of the sarcomere as opposed to like an isolated little connection spot. But you get the idea. The train would be analogous to the myofibril, and the individual cars would be analogous to the sarcomeres. I hope that helps. Maybe it doesn't. All right, so arrangement of filaments in a single muscle fiber. So again, we've got a sarcomere and a Z disc. Oh, shoot. Well, I can't go back, but anyway, so we'll just look at that as a little bit of review. Connective tissue is found within each muscle fiber and at multiple levels outside of it. Absent connective tissue at all these different levels, force could not be efficiently imparted. Not going to be imparted at all. So basically, if the muscle were to contract without the connective tissue attaching it to the bone, then the muscle is just going to be generating heat, or heat energy if you like. Generating heat but not work. So it's not going to be able to produce any force. It's not connected. It's got to be connected. So we've designated the Z disc as connective tissue between sarcomeres. Other regions of connective tissue exist in the skeletal muscles such as endomysium, perimysium, epimysium, fascia, and tendon. By the way, it's not mysium, it's mysium. But anyway, we're not going to hold you to that. I should have a note there. Of those just noted, you need only remember for this class, just for this class now, that multiple levels of connective tissue exist within skeletal muscles, and tendons directly connect the gross muscle to the bone. Got it? So we got a whole bunch of connective tissue all wrapped up in these muscles. These gross muscles are whole muscles, and eventually get to the point where you got a tendon, which is connective tissue for the muscle to the bone. It's got to be intact. If it's not intact, you're in trouble in terms of generating any force. All right, so skeletal muscle connectivity, again, this is just giving you a little drawing or figure of that. So it's, again, you don't have to remember endomysium for this class, but you can see you've got the breakdown of the gross muscle. It's just labeled as muscle. Fascicle, we won't worry about that. It's called a muscle bundle. You've got we've got epimysium, we got perimysium, endomysium, we got the Z disc, and we've got the tendon. Again, I don't want people getting freaked out about this stuff. At this point, you may not have had anatomy and physiology at this point, so you may not know this. But just don't worry about it for now, right? A lot of connective tissue, multiple levels. You can disrupt the connective tissues and still have the muscle operating, but as you lose connective tissue, then we lose, obviously, connectivity, right? So it's not going to be able to work as well. The more connective tissue that's disrupted, the more negatively impacted will be the muscle in terms of generating force.